The Palestinian Authority has blamed the U.S. president's so-called deal of the century for latest escalation of tensions in occupied territories. In a statement, a spokesman for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas warned against what he called Israel's systematic escalation. Nabil Abu Rudain said Palestinian people and their leadership will foil such conspiracies. A senior leader of the Islamic Hamas movement also condemned the U.S. proposal, stressing whoever agrees to the plan will pay a heavy price. Ismail Haniyeh rejected calls to disarm the resistance movement, saying that the group will continue to build up its military in the West Bank. Here's more.
Tensions have been running high in the occupied Palestinian territories since the unveiling of the so-called deal of the century by U.S. President Donald Trump last week. In Jerusalem, Al-Quds, Israeli forces shot dead a Palestinian near Al-Aqsa Mosque over an alleged shooting attempt.
There are real attempts by Israel's spying apparatus, Shabak, to prevent further clashes and anti-Israel operations. Palestinians today have no trust in the so-called deal. Perhaps there won't be a popular uprising, but at the same time there is an increase in operations, and this is hard to curtail.
Meanwhile, 2 other Palestinians were killed by Israeli soldiers overnight Wednesday during an Israeli operation in the West Bank city of Jenin. The victims included a Palestinian policeman. 6 more were wounded. The clashes erupted when Israeli forces raided the city to demolish the home of Palestinian prisoner Ahmed Qumba, who is in jail over his alleged involvement in the killing of a settler in 2018.
We are seeing the whole West Bank is going on against the deal of the century and sending a very strong letter, if you like, or message to the Israelis that we are refusing and we are on the verge, if you like, of maybe more escalation to maybe till we reach to a third Intifada. This is also an indication that the Palestinians fed up with all these kind of atrocities by the Israeli actions.
On Thursday, Israeli troops launched a large-scale search operation in the south of the occupied West Bank for a Palestinian whom Israel has accused of carrying out a car-ramming attack in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, wounding 15 Israeli soldiers. Dozens of Palestinians were wounded during the Israeli operation. Clashes have also erupted between Israeli forces and Palestinians in the city of Bethlehem. Palestinians warned that Tel Aviv is heading towards a heavy-handed crackdown against them in the occupied territories. They say it's an attempt to prevent any form of possible popular uprising related to the recent protests against the U.S. so-called deal of the century. Mona Qandil for Press TV, occupied Ramallah.
And now joining us for this news review is Saeb Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert, joining us out of Belfast, and Rabbi Dovid Weiss Spokesman for Neturei Karta International out of New York. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess we'll start there in Belfast with you, Dr. Shaath. Your thoughts on that? I mean, people say that this thing can be called anything but a deal, basically, because really one side didn't even have a say-so inside this plan of what magnitude the White House think it was going to achieve with this. But your thoughts on what the plan actually stands for and the after effects and the reactions we're seeing today.
You see, this what they tried to call deal of the century. The 80 pages or the 180 pages, as Trump claims, taken straight out of Netanyahu's book, A Place Among Nations, called. This is the vision of Netanyahu himself. It's written in that book. It's there to anybody to see. And this vision of taking over the West Bank, or the best of the West Bank, is the one-state solution which the Likud party always was calling for, ideologically adhering for. And he is there, Netanyahu, beside Trump in there, was trying to compare himself to the founder of the Zionist entity, Ben Gurion, as saying to them, I, myself, and the representative of the Christian Zionist, the Anglican Trump, who want to save his skin depending on the Zionist, we given you Palestine, the Holy Land to you. This is for, that coincide with the this Anglican religious way of thinking and beliefs and as well to the Zionists to rob Palestine and to torture the Palestinians and to rob them of their land. It was this scenario. They want to put the Palestinians squeezed in the West Bank in a three Bundestans, like what the South Africa used to do during the apartheid period and the era, and the United States of America under Trump trying to achieve that, to push the Palestinian to live in their in the three Bundestans, to use them as a cheap labor in the future, enslaved by the Zionist military might, and the rest who cannot sustain a living in there will immigrate. And they push the rest of the Palestinians to the east of the Jordan River, and they can call Jordan their country, whatever. This is the vision the Americans always engineered for this Zionist entity. It's the pity here for their own puppets, like the Jordanian king, who always was a puppet for the United States of America, was now they are compromising his own country to achieve this goal of the deal of the century. It's a gimmick. It's going to fall and it's going to collapse. It's only initiated at this time to serve these two crooks, Netanyahu, to avoid going to jail in the back of the settlers in the West Bank. He is giving us the Holy Land, and Trump, which is achieved today to avoid impeachment with the help of the Republican and the Zionist in the United States of America, and trying to secure another term in office. So they play with the rights of the people, rights of the refugees, to secure individual interests.
And Rabbi Dovid Weiss, I'm going to swing over to you now. Welcome to the program. Sir, now I grew up in Los Angeles, California, from K through 12th, even college and whatnot. And I grew up around a heck of a lot of Jews there. And guess what? The most, biggest sense of humor, most aggressive people I've ever met. And yet, why is it such a stark reality from what I see with the policies that come out of Tel Aviv today?
Well, with the help of the Almighty, I don't know if you are aware, we were there last week when what they called the deal of the century was being broadcasted, was announced. We were in front of the White House. We gone many times in front of the White House, but we went and demonstrated in front of the White House and spoke the voice of Judaism. We did the same thing Friday. We had in Manhattan, we had a demonstration, and again, we simply as a Jew is required, we have to show respect and pray for the well-being of the country where every Jew resides, in Iran and in the United States and Canada, etc. So with respect, we turned to the President of the United States and said that he's being conned, he's being duped by this charade, the Zionist entity, the Zionist state of Israel, that's using the Star of David, the name Israel, and they're claiming it's a Jewish state, while Judaism is subservience to God and is forbidden for the Jewish people to have sovereignty. End of sentence. We're not allowed to have a Jewish state, and we've respected that for 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple, and we're not allowed to kill or steal. And that is why when they made the state, the chief rabbi of Palestine in the United Nations documents, as I always repeat, he said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. This was in 1947, United Nations records. So therefore, this concept of occupying and therefore making a deal, what they call the deal of the century, by giving the Palestinians some buildings or whatever it may be, that is really unacceptable. It is criminal for the Palestinian people. It now makes it look like they are the villains because they won't accept such a unacceptable, a harmful, and nekba to them, that they're being simply put in a prison. The point is that the only acceptable thing is what we've been stating all along, to recognize that the Palestinians were the rightful inhabitants and the indigenous populace of the land, and that to them they should have the right of rule over the land. And that is what the Jewish people want, the ones who are the indigenous Jewish populace of Palestine. And that is what we're being beaten. We refuse to serve in the army. We're being brutally beaten because we state the word of Judaism that the only true deal of the century would be a free Palestine, and then it would return to the way it was before Zionism, where the Jews and Muslims lived together without any human protection because it wasn't necessary, because this is not a religious conflict. This deal of the century is trying to portray the issue as a religious conflict, and therefore the Palestinians should make some type of compromise and accept, as if it is good for them, when they're given a piece of land surrounded by the Israelis, supposedly, who as Netanyahu was saying, godly given to them the land. How repugnant, how dare he speak in the name of God and the religion and claim the right to the land when the Torah forbids us to have one piece of Jewish sovereignty, and we recognize that it should be under Palestinian rule, and we are hurting, we're crying, the Jews around the world, and humiliated and suffering and sympathizing with the Palestinians, and realizing that this word deal of the century makes it, because the Palestinians don't want to accept the subjugation, as if they are criminals, when the truth is the villains is the state of Israel, and the victims are the Palestinians and the Jews who are being oppressed under this Zionist entity that's not a Jewish state, it's the state of Israel. We have to have the world realize that this word, deal of the century, is a vilification of the victims, the Palestinians. We cry with them and we plead with respectfully to the president and others that the only true solution is to diagnose the illness, the problem, which is the occupation, not the Palestinian people. And then if we realize it's an unacceptable occupation, then we can have a proper remedy, would be a removal of the occupation, and that would be the deal of the century. We plead with him.
And we have about less than a minute left. Dr. Shaath, your final thoughts, please.
You see, the Palestinian people and the Arab masses in 1970, they revolted against Nasser, who used to be the Arab hero at some stage, even after the defeat of 1967, because of the Rogers peace initiative to cease fire with the Zionist entity at the time. That's 1970. So the people in Palestine today, they showed themselves are trying to create another intifada against this Zionist entity. They understand this is a colonial entity, and this colonial entity representing the imperialist goals of the United States of America and all the imperialist forces, using a Jewish identity for it, which is being hijacked by the Zionist entity. Most of the Arab people understand, and especially the Palestinian people understand, the Zionists have nothing to do with Judaism, as my friend is saying. And all along, the Palestinian struggle was found on the basis of fighting this colonial entity, which representing imperialism in the region. And the struggle will continue against it. Today we see in the West Bank the first flares of a third intifada will demolish all the hopes this Trump or Netanyahu have to loot Palestine from the Palestinian people.
Gentlemen, pleasure to have you both on. As like always, Saeb Shaath from Belfast and Rabbi Dovid Weiss there joining us from New York. And viewers, that's a wrap for this Press TV News Review. Thanks for tuning in and goodbye for now.